Hello everybody, and welcome to my video lecture for Oscar Wilde's play, The Importance of Being Earnest. Now, you probably don't have this version of the book because this is a little bit more expensive and it's got a lot of back matter in it. But you should be able to follow along with what I'm saying in whatever version of this book that you have, whether it's online, on Kindle, in print, whatever. But this lecture will be about Importance of Being Earnest. Now, if this is the first video lecture you've watched this semester, you'll want to hear what I have to say. If this is your fourth one that you've watched this semester, you'll probably be like, oh, here we go again. But I'll try to keep this as brief as possible. And there's a couple of disclaimers that I'm talking about here. The first one is I'm going to try to keep this video under 30 minutes. You can look at the timestamp at the bottom. Please make sure that you have enough time that you can watch the whole video all the way through. And maybe give yourself a little bit more time in case you want to rewind and hear something again. The other disclaimer is that you may decide that watching me speak into a camera for about 15 minutes, 30 minutes, something like that, might get a little boring. I know that video lectures can sometimes have you sitting there going, ugh, and your butt starts getting numb in the chair, and you start wanting to hit the pause button and stand up and walk around or whatever. And of course, that's the beautiful thing about a video lecture. If you have to hit the pause button to go get a drink of water or whatever you have to do, then you can still do that and come back later. So those are my disclaimers, and now let's get started with the importance of being earnest. So following along with the slideshow, first of all, I'm not going to go through a lot about the biography of Oscar Wilde. Oscar Wilde is probably most well known for the fact that he was flamboyant. He was what is known as a dandy, and he was very openly bisexual. Most people know all of that. I'll let you read that on the slides. I'll also let you read that if there's like a biography in your book or something like that. You can also Google him and get his biography. But what is important about his biography is the fact that he was extremely, extremely intelligent, despite all the sensational headlines that he caused. And he didn't really have a lot of common sense. The reason he got arrested for his homosexuality is because he was a little bit, not too bright about that. But he was extremely intelligent as far as a writer goes. He wrote, in addition to plays, he also wrote novels, he wrote some poetry, and he wrote some very influential literary criticism. The other thing I want to say about Wilde is that he was a part of what is known as the aesthetic movement. What the aesthetic movement is it is art for art's sake, or l'art pour l'art, if you will. And basically, they didn't look for any greater meaning in art, whether it was poetry or literature or painting or whatever kind of art. All they wanted to do is appreciate the beauty of the work of art itself. This was kind of a preview of what would be known as new criticism in the early 20th century. So, all he wanted to do is just create beautiful art. He didn't intend to have a lot of meaning. But whether he likes it or not, this play, The Importance of Being Earnest, is a comedy of manners that pokes a lot of fun at British society. And it also pokes a lot of fun at what is known as the leisure class, which we'll talk about in a minute. All right. Actually, let's go ahead and talk about the leisure class now. The leisure class was basically, they didn't do anything except enjoy themselves and have tea in the gardens and relax and go to art shows and things like that. That was the leisure class. And most of the characters in this play, with the exception of Miss Prism and Reverend Chasuble, and maybe one or two others, are all members of the leisure class. And so this is what he's poking fun of. All right, main characters. Jack Worthing. He is the master of the manor house Woolton in Hertfordshire. That is in the country. This is a big country estate with lots of grounds. But Jack has a little bit of an alter ego. He wants to go into town and have his fun. But he can't go as Jack Worthing because he's just too important a person. Plus, he's been given charge of an 18-year-old girl that he is basically taking care of. This would not look good on his reputation, and people would say that he's a bad influence on Little Miss Cecily. So in order to go into London and have his fun, he has to assume a fake name, which is Ernest. And this name also allows him to visit town without anybody in the country being suspicious. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later. Jack is madly in love with Cecily, and he wants to marry her. And so that's very important as well. as a comedy, this play will end up, as most comedies do, ending in some sort of an engagement. All right. Algernon Algie Moncrief. He is Jack's friend who happens to live in London. It is not really as evident in the play as what it is if you watch the movie version. There's a movie version starring Colin Firth as Jack, Rupert Everett, I think it is, as Algie. Cecily is played by Reese Witherspoon. Judi Dench plays Lady Bracknell. So it's an all-star cast. And in that movie, it becomes even more clear that Algie is broke. And that was one of the problems of being a member of the leisure class. If all you're doing is spending money and you're not making any money, eventually you're going to run into some very heavy debt. And so Algie's in that position. But he also falls in love with Jack's ward, Cecily. And as we're going to find out later, it doesn't hurt that Cecily is also rich, but she happens to be a beautiful 18-year-old girl. All right, the two girls that are the objects of the affection. Gwendolyn Fairfax, she is the daughter of Lady Bracknell, and she is Algie's cousin. So this is probably how Jack met her, was visiting Algie, and there was this beautiful woman, Gwendolyn, and he fell in love with her, and he wants to marry her. Then we've got Cecily Cardew, who is the ward of Jack. She's an 18-year-old orphan who is being tutored by Miss Prism and who is being taken care of by Jack at the manor house, Woolton. Lady Bracknell, she is the main obstacle to Jack's happiness. She is Cecily's mother, and she is Algie's aunt, and she does not want Jack to marry her daughter, Cecily. So, because Jack is, we're going to find out, he doesn't know his heritage, and we're going to talk more about that in a few minutes. So, Lady Bracknell is the antagonist of the play. She's very old-fashioned. She's very worried that the leisure class is about to disappear, and the class society is crumbling, and then what would happen if we didn't have dukes and earls and princes and all those other titles in English society? The horror. This is what Lady Bracknell is very genuinely scared of. All right. And then we've got a couple of minor characters. We've got Reverend Chosful, who is the rector of Woolton. We got Miss Prism, who is Cecily's governess, basically her school teacher. And Reverend Chosful is in love with Miss Prism. As you're going to see, he actually embarrasses himself trying to impress her. And then you've got the two servants. You've got Lane, who is Algie's servant. And then you've got Merriman, who is Jack's butler. All right. So again, this is a comedy of manners. Therefore, it pokes fun at English high society, a.k.a. the leisure class, and the customs of that. Now, the leisure class was a very active class in England. One of the things that the leisure class said that they did was they provided jobs. Does this sound familiar today? Job creation, providing for jobs. That's what the leisure class said they did. And basically, the jobs that the leisure class had were to be butlers, or to be footmen, or to be cooks, or to be chariot drivers, or whatever. But the leisure class were the ones that just basically went from tea party to tea party, or from ball to ball, and formal ball to formal ball, and basically just had fun. It's a nonsense play, and it's inspired by Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland series. There's really no point to this. It's just a whole bunch of nonsense. And you could open up this book to any page and probably find something nonsensical that somebody has said. For example, I've given you a couple of examples on the slideshow. The amount of women in London who flirt with their own husbands is scandalous. And Algie says that. Remember also, Algie says that the way that Jack flirts with Gwendolyn is despicable. Almost as despicable as the way that Gwendolyn flirts with Jack. So, it's like, wait a minute. Why is it despicable that he's hitting on Gwendolyn, and Gwendolyn is hitting back on him? Why shouldn't husbands and wives flirt with each other? Why should they flirt outside of their marriage? Then you've got later on in there when Algie has told Lady Bracknell that his friend Bunbury, and we're going to talk about Bunbury in a minute, has died. Oh, I'm glad that he made up his mind at last on some definite course of action. Now, of course, this definite course of action being death. And acted under proper medical advice. So she's like, Yeah, well, his doctor said he was going to die, so he died. Isn't that nice of him? He followed his doctor's orders. Very nonsensical. And I could go on and on. You know, it's impolite to read a man's private cigarette case. It's a cigarette case, for crying out loud. It's not a book or a diary or anything. And Jack was going to send Scotland Yard on an investigation to find this one cigarette case. Well, I know it's a gift from Cecily and it's important to him, but to send Scotland Yard looking for it? Oh, come on. So there's all kinds of nonsense, and we can go through this play. Just open up to any page and look on it. You will probably find some kind of nonsense in there. All right, and then we got some themes throughout this play. One is the importance of a person's name. One cannot marry into high society unless he or she comes from a family that's already a part of it. So that's one of the themes, is marrying well. Rich people were not allowed to marry poor people. Rich people could only marry rich people for various reasons. All right, the crisis of Jack's lineage, he doesn't know it. He has no knowledge of who his parents are because he was found in a handbag at a train station on the Brighton line. He was found by the very wealthy Thomas Cardew, who then adopted him and raised him. Lady Bracknell takes this very personally. She will not allow Gwendolyn to marry Jack because he can only trace his lineage back as far as a piece of luggage. In fact, she says, I am not going to allow my daughter to marry into a parcel. So, because Jack has no clue who his parents are or who his grandparents are or anything of that nature, Lady Bracknell will stand in his way and not let him marry Gwendolyn because she's not going to let Gwendolyn marry a package that came out of a train station. All right. Then we got marriage itself and the compromising position that Gwendolyn and Cecily are in because others are going to decide whom they can marry and whom they cannot. Remember, Lady Bracknell tells Gwendolyn after she accepts Jack's marriage proposal, oh, well, you are not engaged, young lady. When you are, your father or I will tell you so. This was not that unusual for upper middle class and upper class ladies to have their parents actually decide who they're going to marry. And until Gwendolyn and Jack have Lady Bracknell's blessing, they cannot marry each other. All right. Alter egos. Both Jack and Algernon, at some point in this play, will take on the alter ego of Ernest Worthy. Jack has been doing it for a long time. In fact, he actually has cards. These cards are like business cards. When you call on somebody, you leave your card with them, and the butler will then take the card and put it on something called a slaver and present it to the owner of the home that you're visiting. The person will look at the card and say, oh, yes, I know this person. Please show them into the library, or please show them into the sitting room, or whatever. So these cards, which are called calling cards, were basically designed so that you would give it to the butler or whomever, who would then present the card to whoever the homeowner is before actually being allowed into the house. Jack has gone so far as to have Ernest Worthing printed on these cards, and he's given him a fictional address at that. So, that's that imaginary person. And remember, Algie is going to use the name Ernest Worthing as a way to meet Cecily, because Cecily has never met Jack's brother Ernest, because Ernest is supposed to be such a scoundrel. This actually excites Cecily. I don't know what it is about good girls liking bad boys, but Cecily is excited about her cousin Ernest because he is such a bad boy that he's not allowed onto the property. So when Algie presents the card of Ernest Worthing to Merriman at the estate at Woolton, he's allowed admittance, and Cecily thinks that she is meeting her scandalous cousin. So that is very important. So alter egos allow these men to act in ways that they would not be allowed to act normally. They also allow them admittance into society that they might not otherwise have gotten. All right. So you got the imaginary people. The other imaginary person is Bunbury. Nobody ever takes on the identity of Bunbury because he is very sick. However, the purpose of Bunbury is that he allows Algie to leave town and to get out of social situations he does not want to be in, such as sitting at a table next to the married woman who flirts with her husband across the table, if you'll remember that. So, Algie, by the fact of being sick and he needs his best friend, Algie, means that Algie now has an alibi to leave town and go into the country, or has an alibi to get out of having dinner with Lady Bracknell. So, Bunbury, by the way, becomes a verb. To Bunbury is to go off under false circumstances and have a good time. So, Bunbury is not only a person's name, but it also turns out to be a verb for getting out of a situation. All right, and then the name Ernest. What can we say about the name Ernest? The name Ernest is very important to the ladies because they fall in love with men they've never met before, or with men under false pretenses, simply because their name is Ernest. Remember, I think at one time or other, both of these ladies say to, the man they're speaking to, I fell in love with you the moment I knew your name was Ernest. Ernest is such a wonderful name. The guy could be a scoundrel, the guy could be a murderer, the guy could be anything you wanted to, but these ladies will fall in love with them if their name is Ernest. And it gets to a point where Jack and Algie are willing to become rechristened at the church under the name of Ernest in order to make their name truly Ernest, so that they can marry the man, or the woman, they can marry the woman of their dreams. And then there's that confusion over who Ernest truly is, causing the friction between Cecily and Gwendolyn when they first meet. Because both women think that they are truly engaged to a man named Ernest Worthing. Now you've got two ladies who are fighting with each other. And it turns out that neither one of them is engaged to a person named Ernest Worthing. But they are both engaged to different men who have used the name Ernest Worthing to get their engagements with them. So there's that funny situation in the garden as well. All right, Lady Bracknell, we need to give her a little more attention because we've been ignoring her. Lady Bracknell is a very old-fashioned, snooty woman who cares more about manners and the fact that the leisure class is disappearing than she does about anything substantial. In fact, she tells her nephew, this is in Act 3, she tells her nephew, never speak disrespectfully of society, Algernon. Only when people who cannot get into it do that. So she's saying here something that actually has a little bit of truth to it, which is that society, Annie, be good. Yes, I have a puppy. Annie, be good. Enough. I apologize for that. Come here, Annie. Come here. Let me show you this dog. Come here. Here she is. This is Annie. This is who you just heard barking. Okay? So, say hi to everybody, Annie. Hi. All right. Go have fun. All right. I apologize for that interruption. I hope that it was not unpleasant for you. Okay, getting back to Lady Bracknell. Lady Bracknell is onto something here, because the only people who would badmouth society as being idle and leisurely might be the people that can't get into it, and the people that are in it are actually content. Lady Bracknell is also worried because the landed class is no longer richer in power. Now, in order for somebody to actually have social status or to be wealthy, they have to be wealthy in liquid assets like investments. So remember that when Lady Bracknell disapproves of Cecily because she can only trace her lineage back to the same parcel that Jack could, she immediately has a change of heart as soon as she finds out that Cecily has 130,000 pounds in the funds, which basically means she has 130,000 pounds in government bonds. These are liquid assets, and these are more important to Lady Bracknell than land is now. And, oh, by the way, because Cecily has 130,000 pounds in the funds, she could possibly be Algie's savior. All of a sudden, Algie marries into this, and he can pay off all of his debts. Land, on the other hand, doesn't mean anything anymore in this society. And this is one of the comments that Oscar Wilde is making about society in this play. All right. a lot of the characters in this play place more importance on style than they do on substance. First of all, we've already discussed a little bit about how Gwendolyn and Cecily can only fall in love with their chosen man if they have the name of Ernest. Jack just isn't a very stylish name. We can't have somebody named Jack. Algie? Oh, that's too snooty. But Ernest, the only fair name. The women don't always believe their men's answers to their questions, but they love the style of the words that the men have chosen. The play opens up with Algie playing the piano. And notice how, there's that funny moment he walks in. Lane, did you hear me play the piano? And Lane's like, I did not believe it was polite to listen, sir. Now remember, he's playing the piano so loudly that nobody in the house can help but to hear it. Everybody has to hear it. Yet, I just didn't think it was very polite to listen to you play the piano, sir. To which Algie says, oh, well, that's a shame. Anybody can play the piano accurately. Anybody can read the notes and hit the right keys. But he plays with expression. He doesn't play accurately. He plays with style. He plays with expression. In other words, art for art's sake. Another part. Fiction means that the good ends happily and the bad ends unhappily. This would be fiction as an art rather than fiction as a depiction of true life. When the prince and princess get married, they don't always live happily ever after. But in fiction they do. So this is a statement about fiction and how, in fact, this whole play is a little bit of a statement about that. About how fiction means that everything that's supposed to end happily does, and there's no problems after the happily ever after, and anything that's supposed to end badly does end badly, and there's no chance of redemption. The truth in real life is neither one of those things are true. And those of you that are only 18 years old will learn that as you age. All right. Cecily lives her engagement to Ernest Worthing through her diary instead of living through a real engagement. In other words, she wrote all of his letters for him. She had a mock breakup. She had a mock getting back together. So here, poor Algie doesn't realize he's been engaged to Cecily for the last 3 months. But since Cecily's not living a real engagement, she has to live it fictionally, and she does that through her diary, which someday she plans to publish. So again, getting back to the nonsense. Oh, this is for publication, therefore it cannot be read by anybody. Yeah, well, if you publish it, what's going to happen, right? Lady Bracknell, of course, judges Cecily's social possibilities and nothing more than her profile. Remember, her first clue that Cecily might be a good catch is the 130 pounds in funds. But then remember, oh, turn sideways, my girl. Let's take a look at your profile. Oh, yes, a beautiful chin. Oh, a profile like that will be perfect in society. It doesn't matter whether Cecily is a good girl or a bad girl. It doesn't matter about anything except for the fact that her profile is beautiful. Therefore, she is ready for society. And then, of course, there's the whole no lady should ever give her correct age when asked. We still see that in today's society. I know ladies that have been 39 years old for about the past 10 years. Again, more about style, less about substance. And all the characters in this play are like that. So that's it. That is the whole of the play. Those are all the main points that I wanted to make about the play in this video lecture. Now, of course, you'll probably notice other things as you go through this as well that you might want to write about. But, and remember, look at the questions whenever that I pose before you actually start writing. Those questions can be helpful also, even though you're not limited to them. So, that's The Importance of Being Earnest by Oscar Wilde, a comedy of manners, but a very impactful one. It was a critical and a commercial success when it was released, and it was probably the happiest point in Oscar Wilde's life before he ended up, having to go to jail. So, with all of that, I hope you've enjoyed this lecture. I hope you found it beneficial.